I've been sitting on this one for years, and I don't really know why I'm writing it now. Maybe because it doesn't feel like it was me anymore. Or maybe because I finally understand what I actually did. This wasn't some dramatic heist. No masks, no breaking into servers like in movies. It started with something small. Something boring, even. A spreadsheet. Back then, I worked a forgettable job at a mid-sized marketing firm. Nothing special. Data handling, client lists, email campaigns. The kind of place where nobody double-checks what you're doing as long as numbers keep moving. I wasn't desperate. That's the worst part. I wasn't starving, I wasn't in debt. I was just stuck. Same routine, same paycheck, same feeling that everyone else was somehow getting ahead while I was standing still. And then one day, I realized something. I had access to everything. Names. Emails. Phone numbers. Purchase histories. Even notes about people, habits, preferences, sometimes things that felt way too personal to be sitting in a company database. At first, it didn't feel like anything. Just data. Rows and columns. But then I started wondering what that data was actually worth. Not to the company. To someone else. That was the first mistake, thinking about people as numbers you could package and sell. It didn't feel like hurting anyone. It felt like moving files from one place to another. Clean. Quiet. Invisible. I remember the exact moment it crossed from thought into intention. I told myself, if nobody notices, did anything really happen? That question stuck with me longer than it should have. I didn't jump into it right away. That's the thing people don't tell you. Crossing a line like that isn't a single step. It's a series of tiny justifications that slowly make the wrong thing feel acceptable. For a while, I just observed. I'd open client profiles and scroll longer than necessary, noticing patterns. Who spent the most, who responded to certain types of ads, who had complete personal profiles filled out. It stopped feeling like people, and more like profiles in a game, data points waiting to be used. I told myself everyone already gives away their information anyway. Social media, apps, loyalty programs, it's all the same, right? That was the lie I leaned on. That I wasn't really taking anything, just redirecting what was already floating around out there. Then came the money thought. It wasn't even a clear plan yet. Just curiosity. I started browsing forums late at night, nothing too shady at first, just marketing communities talking about lead generation and data acquisition. The language made it sound clean, almost legitimate. That's when it clicked. There were people actively buying this kind of information. And I was sitting on a gold mine. I remember leaning back in my chair, staring at my screen, feeling this weird mix of excitement and unease. Like I had just discovered a shortcut, but wasn't sure if I should take it. I didn't stop myself. I started thinking, how would I even do this without getting caught? Once that question settled in, how would I do this without getting caught? I stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like someone trying to get away with something. I didn't rush. That was the one smart thing I did. For weeks, I just watched how the system worked. Who accessed what, when audits happened, what actually triggered alerts. Turns out, most of the safeguards were there for show. As long as you didn't do anything loud or obvious, nobody really cared. I also kept digging through those forums, but deeper this time. The kind where people don't ask if something is legal, they just discuss how to do it better. I never posted. Just read. Learned the language. Learned what kind of data was valuable, and how it was usually packaged. Clean lists. Verified contacts. Segmented audiences. It all sounded so professional. That made it easier to ignore what it actually was. I even tested small things at work, exporting tiny batches of data under legitimate reasons. Campaign drafts, internal analysis. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even noticed. That's when the fear started fading. And something else replaced it. Confidence. Not the good kind. The dangerous kind that makes you think you're smarter than the system you're inside. The shift from thinking about it to actually doing it didn't feel dramatic. No big moment. No voice in my head telling me to stop. It was a Tuesday. Slow day. Half the team working remotely. My manager barely online. I remember because I kept checking, like I needed silent confirmation that no one was watching. I opened the database like I had 100 times before. Pulled up a segment, high-value clients, recent activity, full profiles. The kind of list marketing teams obsess over. My hands didn't shake. That's what still bothers me. I exported a file. Labeled it something boring, something routine. The kind of name no one would ever question in a system full of similar files. Then I just sat there, staring at it. This was the point where I could have closed it, deleted it, pretended nothing happened. Instead, I transferred it. Not to anything obvious, just a temporary space I'd set up after reading those forums. Layers between me and the file. Enough to feel safe. When it was done, nothing happened. No alarms. No emails. No one tapping me on the shoulder. That silence? It was the worst possible outcome. Because it told me I could do it again. Having the data was one thing. Sitting on it made me nervous in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't useful just sitting in some hidden folder. It was a risk without a reward. So I took the next step. This was the part that felt more real than anything before. Exporting data? I could still pretend it was a mistake, an internal task. But this meant admitting to myself what I was actually doing. I went back to those forums, but this time I didn't just read. I reached out. Carefully. Vague at first. I didn't say what I had, just hinted. Used the same language I'd seen others use. Access to verified consumer segments. It sounded so clean, like I was offering a service instead of betraying thousands of people. It didn't take long. Someone replied within a day. No introductions, no questions about who I was. Just interest. Direct transactional. That should have been a red flag. Instead, it felt validating. Like I had something valuable. We moved the conversation off the forum pretty quickly. Encrypted messaging, anonymous accounts, everything I had read about, now actually happening. And the strangest part? It started to feel normal. Like I had just picked up a side hustle no one else knew about. Once the conversation moved off the forum, things got very straightforward, almost uncomfortably so. No small talk, no pretending. The person on the other end treated it like a normal business deal. They asked what kind of data I had. I didn't send anything yet, just described it. High-value clients, recent activity, detailed profiles. I tried to sound confident, like I'd done this before. Truth was, I was improvising everything. They responded with a price range. That number hit me harder than I expected. Not life-changing money, but enough to matter. Enough to make this feel very real. I remember rereading it 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. We negotiated a little. Or at least I tried to. Looking back, it was almost laughable. I was nervous, overthinking every word, while they stayed cold and efficient. Eventually, we agreed. Partial sample first. Then payment. Then the full dataset. Simple. Too simple. Before sending anything, I double-checked everything on my side. The layers I'd set up, the accounts, the file itself. Removed anything that could directly point back to me, or at least I thought I did. I hesitated right before sending the sample. Not out of morality. Out of fear. Because once I did this, there was no pretending anymore. I wish I could say I stopped there. That I closed the chat, deleted the file, and walked away. I didn't. It came from a coworker. She messaged me one afternoon, asking why I had accessed a specific client segment earlier that week. Nothing aggressive, just casual curiosity. She needed it for something and noticed recent activity. My heart dropped instantly. I had an answer ready, though. I always kept one. I told her I was prepping a campaign draft, testing segmentation ideas. Threw in just enough jargon to make it sound boring and legitimate. She accepted it. Or at least, she didn't push further. But something changed after that. For the first time, I realized I wasn't invisible. Someone had noticed something. It just hadn't escalated. That thin layer of confidence I'd built started to crack. I went back and checked everything. Logs, timestamps, access history. Looking for anything that might connect dots I hadn't seen. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty. Because I realized how easily this could unravel if even one person looked a little closer. After that message from my coworker, I couldn't go back to the comfortable rhythm I'd built. The illusion of being invisible was gone. Now every action felt like it left a trace. So I adapted. Or at least I thought I did. I started spacing things out even more. Fewer exports, more time in between. I made sure every access had a reason tied to it, something I could point to if anyone ever asked again. Reports, test campaigns, internal reviews. I buried the real activity under layers of legitimate work. I also got more paranoid. Every notification made my chest tighten. Every unexpected email felt like it could be the one. I checked my accounts constantly, reread conversations with the buyer, even considered cutting contact completely. But I didn't. Because the money was still coming in. And now there was something else too, pressure. The buyer expected consistency. More data, new segments. They weren't asking directly, but it was implied. I told myself I was still in control. That I could stop whenever I wanted. But the truth was, I was already reacting instead of deciding. And once you're in that position, you're not ahead anymore. You're just trying not to fall behind. The thing about dealing in data is that it feels abstract, until it suddenly isn't. I was going through another batch one evening, filtering profiles like I always did, when I froze. I recognized the name. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Common name, nothing unusual. But then I saw the email, the purchase history, the notes. It was someone I actually knew. Not a close friend, but close enough. Someone I'd talked to in real life, shared a drink with once or twice. And there they were, reduced to a profile I had already tagged, sorted, and probably included in one of the datasets I'd sold. I just sat there staring at the screen. That was the first time the whole thing snapped back into focus. These weren't just entries in a system. These were real people, with routines, habits, private details they never expected to leave that context. And I had already sold that. Not just in general. Possibly them. I tried to rationalize it, like before. Told myself it was just one person in thousands. That the chances of anything happening were low. But the distance I'd been hiding behind? It was gone. And for the first time, it actually felt wrong. After that moment, I told myself I'd slow down. Maybe even stop. Just take a break, let things cool off. But it didn't work like that. A few days later, I got a message from the buyer, short, direct, but different this time. They weren't just asking what I had available. They referenced previous datasets. Specific ones? That immediately put me on edge. Until then, everything had felt one-sided. I had the data, they paid for it. Simple. But now it was clear they were keeping track. Paying attention. They asked for a larger batch. More detailed segmentation. And the price they offered was higher than before. That should have felt like an opportunity. Instead, it felt like pressure. I hesitated longer than usual before replying. Tried to keep it neutral, professional. But in my head, everything was louder, every risk, every possible way this could spiral. I even thought about backing out. Just disappearing. But then another thought crept in, what if they don't like that? I didn't know who I was dealing with. And that uncertainty started to feel heavier than the risk of continuing. So I agreed. Even though, at that point, I wasn't doing it for curiosity anymore. I was doing it because I felt like I couldn't just stop. The bigger the job, the harder it was to stay careful. That's something I understood in theory, but living it is different. This dataset was larger than anything I'd handled before. More profiles, more detail, tighter deadlines. I had to pull from multiple segments, merge everything, clean it up. It took time, and more importantly, more system access than usual. That's where I slipped. Not in some obvious, dramatic way. No huge mistake. Just a small oversight. One export tied too closely to an internal request that didn't quite match. Something that, on its own, probably wouldn't mean much. But patterns matter. A day later, I noticed something unusual. Access logs I checked regularly looked reviewed. Not changed, not flagged, just opened by someone higher up. That alone was enough to make my stomach drop. Then came the email. Company-wide at first. Routine language about data handling audits and security reviews. The kind of message everyone schemes and ignores. Except this time, I couldn't ignore it. Because for the first time, it felt like it wasn't random. It felt like it was getting closer to me. Once the audit email went out, the atmosphere at work shifted, subtly, but enough for me to feel it. People started double-checking things, asking more questions, looping managers into tasks that used to be routine. And then I got the meeting invite. Short. Vague. Just me, my manager, and someone from IT. That was the moment everything I'd been holding together started to fall apart. I spent the entire night before going over every possible explanation. Every file name, every access log, every excuse I'd ever used. Trying to build a version of reality that could survive even a little scrutiny. It didn't feel convincing, even to me. The meeting itself was calm, too calm. They didn't accuse me outright. Just asked questions. Why I accessed certain datasets. Why there were inconsistencies in how I labeled exports. Small things, but stacked together in a way that made it impossible to brush off. I tried to stick to my story. At first. But the more they asked, the more I realized they already knew something was wrong. Maybe not everything, but enough. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This wasn't about whether I'd get caught anymore. It was about how much they could prove. I didn't confess everything in that meeting. Not right away. I stuck to partial truths, mistakes, mislabeling, process errors. Anything that sounded careless instead of intentional. But it didn't hold for long. They had logs, patterns, timestamps that didn't line up with my explanations. Within days, I was suspended. Then terminated. There was an internal investigation. I don't know how far it went beyond the company, and honestly, I was too afraid to ask. The buyer disappeared the moment I stopped responding. Just gone. Like none of it ever existed. Except it did. The money I made? It didn't feel like a win anymore. It felt radioactive. I'd barely touched it after everything happened. What stayed was something else. The realization that I hadn't just broken company rules, I'd violated people. Real people who trusted that their information was handled responsibly. And I traded that trust for short-term gain and the illusion of control. If you're reading this and thinking about doing something similar, don't. Not because you'll definitely get caught. But because even if you don't, you'll know exactly what you became to make it work. And that part doesn't go away.